Hello and welcome to Educated STEM. I'm Kate, the founder of Educated STEM, and today I'm going to be giving you 2 book recommendations if you are either in graduate school or you are considering going the academic route. So the first book I'm going to talk about is by Dr. Thomas R. Coughlin. I think that might be how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if it isn't. It's here. It is called How to Make Your PhD Work, a Guide for Creating a Career in Science and Engineering. Now, I must admit, it took me months to read this book, not because it's a bad book, it's a great book, but because I was nursing my very sick dog whilst I was reading it. Thomas, your claim to fame is that my dog puked on your book while she was being incredibly sick. So I'm sorry, I will always remember your book fondly because I was attempting to read it whilst I was nursing her in her last couple of months of life. So apologies, Thomas, but that is how I'm going to remember your book. It's a great book, but I would definitely encourage you to take a gander if you are looking for some support. So he starts off talking about going through your PhD. And so the first half of the book is really about understanding how to get through your PhD, trying to figure out if your PhD is being successful. So he actually has a number of pages where he asks you questions and you answer them and you can figure out how successful you are currently being. So he has a rubric for how you decide how well it's going for your project, working with your advisor, and the environment. And there's an even longer one at the back of the book as an appendix for a diagnostics test, which is fab. I'd never really seen this before, but it's a very good idea, and you can kind of look at this and maybe you do it every year as you go through your PhD and kind of see, are you progressing? Are things going well? Are you on task? Are you going to need to do more things? And he encourages you to think about your career path as you go through. So later on in the book, he actually has things that you might want to consider doing in your first, second, third, fourth, fifth year to make sure that by the time that you graduate, you are ready and able to then step into the career that you want to go on to, or go on to a postdoc or whatever it is. So in that way, it is very helpful. What I really liked about this book is that there are a number of transition stories in here. And there's a number of books which are very similar, and a lot of them also have transition stories. But what I thought was really useful and interesting about this is that the people who wrote them, I think, have been incredibly honest. So if they've had issues with their PhD mentor or a postdoc advisor, they don't gloss over that. They talk about how that affected their career. If they initially went off on the wrong path and they kind of had to self-correct to come back into a different career, that is also addressed. So I think it's going to be very helpful if you read this. What I really like is at the end, he does the same thing. He talks about his own story in the way that everyone else has. So you can really kind of understand how his kind of career path turned out. It's a very easy to read book. Even though it took me a very long time, it's actually quite a quick read if you sit down. And I think he encourages you just to spend 30 minutes 2 or 3 times a week on doing something. So reading the book and then taking some of his advice and putting it into practice. And really, if you think about it, I know I can go down a rabbit hole and be on Instagram for 30 minutes, and by the end I'm like, oh, I've just wasted all this time. So he's right. It's only 30 minutes for you to think about, maybe what skills you enjoy, or, looking up potential job titles and what they are involved, or potential companies that you might want to work for. So, the way that he puts it, it kind of makes career exploration a little easier. He kind of makes it so it's It's manageable. It's not quite as scary. The one thing that I will say is that it doesn't necessarily go into major detail about a lot of the different jobs and what they do. So, for instance, I'll give you something here. So it says PhD level jobs in large companies: medical science liaison, product sales specialist, principal engineer, scientist, marketing research analyst, business development manager, regulatory affairs specialist, and technical scientific or medical writer. And each of those has a paragraph, and it might be a 4-line paragraph. So it will give you, a small amount of information about different jobs. It's a starting point. If something looks interesting for you, you will then need to go and research that role. This is not going to give you enough information to really get your teeth into, but it's definitely enough where you can consider a number of different career paths, and it will give you enough information where you're like, oh, I should look into that. And so it's a good starting off point for potential careers. But I will say that if you're going through the your PhD, it's a good one. It is definitely up there with the other book that I recommended, A Field Guide to Graduate School, in my last book recommendation video. This is purely for STEM and engineering, or science and engineering. So this is much more focused, which is great. So I would definitely endorse this book. And then the second book I'm going to talk about is The Bee's Knees. So I tried to look up, in the last book recommendation video I put up, I'm sure someone responded to me and said, this is the book that we use if you're applying for faculty jobs, not necessarily the book that I was reviewing there. And I'd never heard of it. And I got it, and it's great. I love this book. So this is the Academic Job Search Handbook, 5th edition, by Julia Miller Vick, Jennifer S. Furlong, and Rosanne Lurie. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But it's, oh my gosh, it's great. It's a big one. It's a lot of information. And they take you through everything that you could possibly need to try and become a professor. So they talk about, figuring out what position or kind of what institution you want to work at. They take you through the documents that you need to prepare. There are so many examples in here of all of the documents that you need. And it's great because they cover science careers, but also humanities subjects. So regardless of the field that you work in, pretty sure there's going to be examples of documents in here that will be helpful to you, which is fantastic. Some of the other books that I've seen generally focus on giving 1 or 2 examples. This book has oodles. So it's definitely a very helpful book. I couldn't recommend it enough. This is going to be my favorite book to recommend if you are going the faculty route. I'm sorry, Professor isn't, but it is. It's fantastic. I really can't say enough. So if you want to go the professor route, this is the book. This is the book you need. So I would encourage you to read that. There is also information in here, possibly if you want to go the professor route, that's also very helpful. But this is your new Bible if you want to go this route. So I hope that helps. I think both books are good. And obviously I still like the books that I read last time. They were also good books to utilize. And so if you have the time, just like Thomas says, 30 minutes every few days, you will get through books and other things very quickly if you are just regimented and you just do a little bit of work at a time. What's the saying? How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. So how are you going to figure out getting through your PhD and figuring out what your career is going to be? one little step at a time. So you can do this. So I hope those help. If you have your personal favorite books, then please drop them in the comments. If I haven't heard or read them before, I would love to take a look. And maybe I'll do another video on those in the future. So thank you. Bye-bye.